SMC WPPP program and why we're talking about our yards today.
Thanks, Paige. Hello, everybody. I'm Reed Bogert. I work with the San Mateo Countywide Water Pollution Prevention Program, and our outreach program is called Flows to Bay. So that's the main public-facing part of our work. And we represent the 21 municipalities in San Mateo County, and we support the local municipalities with implementing stormwater management requirements that are passed down through the Clean Water Act and through the state and the regional water board in our area. And so this is just a list of the main focus areas of our overall program, a piece of which is public education and outreach, which is sort of the focus today here. But we also do focused work with residents, businesses, and schools, among other entities throughout the San Mateo County area to basically reduce pollution and stormwater impacts to the Bay and the Pacific Ocean and our local creeks and water bodies. So that's really the main function of our program. And we do take a watershed approach in thinking about how to manage rainwater more sustainably and effectively to reduce pollution. But with climate change impacts underway, we're also thinking more about how to utilize stormwater as a resource rather than just having it flow out to the Bay or the ocean unused. So that's really a big focus of what we're doing. And there will be some great information on how to do that at your home with the rebate programs that we're going to talk about today and transforming a typical garden into a sustainable water resource landscape. So just for background, what is a watershed? I think most of us here are kind of in the know about how water flows through the landscape, but really it is just the physical area in a landscape and all the characteristics of the land that dictate how water flows over and through a physical land area. And so that is a watershed. And you can see the different ways that water can be affected by the landscape, including the slope of the land, how much vegetation is covering the landscape, the urbanized areas where water tends to flow over surfaces rather than going into the ground and into local creeks and into the groundwater system. So this is the model that we work from, and a big part of what we try to do is to bring back the natural hydrologic cycle, especially in the more urbanized areas. And so we can do that through things like rain gardens and green infrastructure, as we call it, to infiltrate water where it falls and bring back that natural cycle. Slide. And so we do talk about stormwater a bit differently from sewer water. And so additional context in terms of the water systems out there. The sanitary sewer system on the left is how our sewage is managed. And so everything that's piped to a building will, including our homes and businesses, will go to a sanitary sewer plant, a wastewater treatment plant for treatment. And so the water is cleaned up to a very high level before it's discharged to the bay or the ocean in our case. And in our communities, this is not always the case, but in San Mateo County, the storm drain infrastructure, the storm drain system, is separate from the sewer system, the sanitary sewer system. So all the rainwater that falls on the landscape travels through a different series of pipes. It runs off buildings and sidewalks and roads down into hard piped infrastructure underground and will flow out to the bay or the ocean or local creeks untreated. So there is no form of treatment whatsoever on that water. And so that's where there are issues of potential pollutants in the runoff out to our creeks, the bay, and the ocean. And that presents the opportunity to think about how to manage stormwater differently. Go to the next slide. And these are just a few examples of the things that we're concerned about in stormwater runoff. And so you're probably familiar with these things: pet waste, vehicle fluids and tire wear actually is a more important contaminant that we're learning more and more about as the science comes out on this. Trash is an ongoing issue. We see this a lot throughout the Bay Area. And so there are ways to protect our waterways from trash, including screening devices, which are installed in catch basins, as you can see, and other forms of pollution. Even washing your car at home, believe it or not, can contribute to pollutants. The soaps and cleaners that you use on a vehicle, if you're washing that off in your driveway, for instance, the runoff will go down into the storm drain untreated. So more sustainable to take your car to a commercial car wash, in fact. And then you can just see how those pollutants will accumulate in ponded water, and that can include some pretty nasty stuff, including pesticides and fertilizers and other industrial chemicals that are out in the landscape. And so everything that we're talking about today is one way to help reduce these impacts and to raise awareness too, is just understanding what those impacts are and how we can think differently about protecting the waters that are in our area. So I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Haven. We're really fortunate to have Haven to explore how to transform a yard into a really water resilient landscape. And we have some nice incentives to help folks do that, and rain barrel and rain garden rebate offerings within San Mateo County. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Haven and kickstart the discussion today. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Reed. All right, I'll just give a brief introduction about myself. I'm Haven Kiers. I'm an assistant professor in landscape architecture at University of California, Davis. And I've been involved in green infrastructure for a while now. My background was actually in designing and installing green roofs. But I'm really excited about the idea of how can we take green infrastructure, stuff that we know that is good for us, that's sustainable, that, does good things. How can we take something like that and make it something that people want? We're not doing it just because, we should, just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's sexy and chic and like our neighbors have it and we want things like that. So that's the approach that I take to rain gardens. We're like, all of what Reed said is so important, and there's a reason that we're doing what we're doing, but I don't want it to feel punitive. I don't want you to be doing a rain garden just because you should. I want you to be doing a rain garden because it is so fun and cool, and you can't wait to see, how amazing your garden is and how it develops and all of that. So I'm going to start with a brief introduction of rain gardens. I'm going to go through some of these photos pretty quickly because we've got a lot of slides, but the good thing is that this will be available afterwards. And then I'm going to answer questions within there. So let's get started. All right, so our goals for the webinar basically are to, learn basic ideas for construction and maintenance, which is going to be a very important part of residential rain gardens, and be inspired. That's the part that I get excited about, right? To transform your own lawn or landscape, whatever you have, into a rain garden, a portion of it, the whole thing, and then really discover, like, what are some of these stylish rain garden designs? What are some plants that do well that you can include that aren't just the same old boring things that you see, at the bottom of every rain garden? How can we do this so that it is just a beautiful garden that provides, happiness and, respite, and reduces anxiety and does all of the sort of nature RX things that we also want our gardens to do. So let's start by talking about, what is a rain garden and why is it that, we need it? So, basically, rain garden, there are lots of ways to describe it. For this purpose, we want to think of it as a resource for private property owners to capture stormwater runoff from your site. So before it goes into those storm drains and picks up all of the things from off of the street and the oils and the pollutants and the pesticides, if we can capture it on our own property and get that go and recharge the groundwater, that is our absolute goal. So really, all we're thinking about when we're talking about a rain garden is just a shallow landscaped area that's designed to capture, slow, and potentially infiltrate water that's coming off, from your building, from your roof, from your driveway, and that sort of thing. And so, you know, we can think about it capturing from your roof. We can think about capturing stormwater from any kind of paved surfaces, from your driveway, patios. And the idea is that let's just grab that water, hold on to it, slow it before it goes then into this whole pipe system that we really, if we don't need it, want it to go in there, if we don't need it to go in there, we don't want to do that. And so why do we need them? The important thing to know is that, you know, Reed pretty much covered it already, right? The water that is coming off of our streets, off of our roofs, off of buildings, that is getting, you know, it's coming out quickly. It's coming out dirty. It's, you know, it's destroying things. And so if you think about it, like we've got this amazing engineering system where engineers have worked so hard and have done a great job at taking all of the water off of the streets and quickly transferring it into pipes and getting rid of it so that we don't have to deal with it. So we don't have to worry about flooding. And so if you think about it, like there's all of that water, once that goes in, it's kind of lost to us. And so the water that's going into our storm drain system is going to be, it's going to be dirty, you know, with all of the pollutants. It's going to be going really quickly because, again, really well-engineered pipes that are moving through. So lots of speed, lots of water, so that then the water that goes out into our bay, into rivers and creeks, it's coming out that's dirty. It's super fast. So when it does spit out into whatever body of water, it's going to cause erosion and it's going to be warmer, right? Because it's been going over like hot roofs and roads. And so we're adding like warm water into our bays, destroying habitat, destroying places where, you know, our fish are, insects. So if we can slow it, if we can do good things on our own yard, reduce even that water, even reduce that first flow of water. So let's say, you know, we don't have to trap, we don't have to be heroes and trap everything in our own yards, but even if we can just slow that down so that that initial surge isn't this big erosion causing kind of surge of water, that's going to be really important. So, you know, ideally, we can reduce then the amount of stormwater that's going into our local streams and bays and all of that area. So here you can see sort of an urban creek where all of that water being funneled into sort of piped, fast moving things. This is what we want to avoid. So the idea is, how can we replace lawn with rain gardens? And I mean, it's definitely, we've got lawns. This is definitely a hot topic right now, you know, removing lawn, the icon of the American lawn, but can we think about it in a different way? I'm not saying you need to go and immediately tear out all of your lawn and replace it with a rain garden. I'm saying let's start small. Let's do a little bit and then we can go bigger from that. And so let's start thinking about what makes a successful rain garden and what can you do within your own property in just a small little area. So basically, successful rain garden, what are the things? The main thing is that you've got like a downspout or you've got driveway area that's directing runoff into this rain garden. And as I said, the rain garden is really nothing more than a slightly recessed landscaped area. So it's just, you know, it's just a little divot actually within your garden that can hold water for a little while, that can absorb water, and then any excess water goes off. So rain gardens planted with plants, and ideally your plants are adaptable to both dry and wet conditions. This is where things get tricky, and we'll talk more about this because like that's like a heroic plant. What are the plants that can do that? But what people don't talk about is the fact that there's like edges of rain gardens and tops of rain gardens, and the only superheroes of plants are just the ones at the very bottom. And there are plants that do that. And that's one of the areas that I'm actually spending some time researching and trying to learn more about it. Other key point is that you want that rain garden to be at least 10 feet away and downstream from your house, because no one wants to store water right up against their house and have it go back and, you know, create all sorts of problems. So we're going to move it away. And then if it fills up, you know, we don't want to cause flooding. So we want to have an overflow route for any excess water. And then the benefits, beyond just being beautiful, one of the main ones is increasing biodiversity within an urban landscape. And we are learning more and more about how important it is to bring in pollinators, to bring in beneficial insects, to birds, songbirds, and regular birds, and all sorts of really cool critters, like, you know, all sorts of fun caterpillars and then hummingbirds, right? So we've got sexy ones, but then we've got these other ones that are kind of like just fun to learn about and see. And we need that within our urban landscapes. So that's going to be a first one. Decreasing the amount of stormwater runoff and pollutants we already talked about. But thinking about this as sort of, improving property value. Yes, there is the traditional American lawn, but there's also property value, and there's study after study shows how important it is that having a beautiful garden and an outdoor landscape can really improve, property values, improve neighborhood values. I mentioned already the beneficial insects and pollinators, but then also, if we're replacing our lawn with drought tolerant plants, then we're really going to be reducing the amount of water that we're using in our landscape. And, if we're using native plants and we're using some of these native plants that insects have co-evolved with, then we're also hitting both that biodiversity and helping with the insect goals. So we're doing 2 in 1. So I'm going to go through these quickly just so that you get a sense of some of these transformations and how easy it is, and how, you may say, oh, I just have this tiny little, postage stamp front yard or area. Anything can be a rain garden. So you can see, insert rain garden here. And then you can see how simple, you can see where the downspout goes in. Very simple, moving that downspout, moving the water into this landscape. Another one, looking at just a yard, adding a rain garden, and see how then your front yard can be this beautiful thing with grasses, with some sort of runnel. You can have a tree, but thinking about that as you walk by and how beautiful that would be, for a front yard. Here's another one. Again, another beautiful area where you've got flowers, you're capturing. In this one, you can see that there's even a walkway that was created so that the water can go underneath that walkway, and there's a nice little bridge, make it kind of fun. And then even just like a partial lawn conversion. So just a small, still keeping your lawn, again, starting small, and then adding a little area. This is planted area that then absorbs the water from the roof, takes that in, and then the excess can go in through the lawn. So you can see that's where the water goes in. But then residential rain garden applications, right? So the thing to think about for your own garden is that it can be any size, it can be any location, it can be linear, it can be rectilinear, it can be circular, it can be amoeba-like. You really can play, but the whole idea is that it's designed to work with the surrounding landscape, with the area around you, so that it just fits in. Again, this is not like, just saying, oh, look, here's a rain garden, this is the square that I put in. We're thinking about a garden that is multifunctional. So it's going to be giving you wonderful happiness because you're out there seeing plants, seeing these insects, watching the hummingbirds come in. I mean, I think this is a stunning example of a rain garden right here. I mean, look at those flowers in bloom, crazy, wonderful profusion of flowers. So you've got that makes you happy. Your neighbors are jealous, and you're taking in this water. You've got rain, you've got the stormwater from your roof covered, and you're not adding to the stormwater, to the pressure of the stormwater drains. I mean, perfect, right? Here's another example where you can see plants, a couple boulders. I'm going to talk a little bit about the profusion and how it doesn't need, just because it's a rain garden, you don't need to use a million rocks to show it as a rain garden. It doesn't have to be that. It can be mostly plants. You can even do rain gardens without any of the rocks. You don't have to create any of the runnels of rocks and the fake rivers and that sort of thing. But so some more examples, again, where you can see water moving, just a garden, a bench to be able to sit in. So thinking about how do you create a space that becomes a sanctuary for yourself. And, my goal, again, is that as a designer that's trying to promote green infrastructure, is how do I balance the sanctuary for you, for the humans, but also creating a sanctuary habitat for these beneficial insects, for our pollinators, for the birds, so that everyone can be in the same space and be benefiting from it. And at the same time, we're capturing all this water. So cool, right? So fun. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the design considerations. How do you get these fantastic, amazing gardens in front of your own home? So the first thing you want to do is an existing conditions analysis. What is there? How quickly does the water, if you're capturing it, how quickly does it drain? How well do the plants work? So this kind of thing. What is the best spot? And that's going to be absolutely the first thing, right? And we're going to be working with different guidelines of like 10 feet away from the house, 5 feet or 3 feet away from the sidewalk. You know, thinking about the soil conditions, thinking about, I know where I am in Davis, we have so much clay soil, you know, so it's just like, it's thick, it holds on to that water. So it's going to take a little while before it drains, and it will drain, but it also means that it'll fill up pretty quickly and have that overflow. So before it can all drain in. So thinking then again about the overflow and where that's going to go. Where is the stormwater runoff coming from? Is it a simple, you know, just gutter from the roof and a downspout that then is going through? Are you capturing it from your driveway, from a patio? And then grading conditions. Are you on a steep slope? Is there an area that's a natural low point within your yard that makes sense? Thinking about mature trees and big roots, right? We don't want to cut into large roots of existing trees. And then the setback requirements. So that is it varies, but I've got we'll show you some general things to think about in terms of like the 10 feet from the house, the area, you know, 5 feet from sort of side yard setbacks, and then away from the sidewalk. And if you have that extra water, do you have a space? Where can that go? You know, so that it can go as an overflow into the area, into the storm waters. And so, as I said, this is not, you know, something that has to just happen front and center in your yard. If you want it to, you can bring it into a cool side yard kind of thing, you know, use that sort of unutilized space. Side yard is where I always put these plants that I think are great and that are beneficial and wonderful for insects, but they're actually kind of ugly. We've got some of those. So I always talk about tucking things away. Side yards are perfect for tucking things away, where you can be doing some of this good stuff and promoting biodiversity, but you don't have to advertise it to everyone, and it doesn't have to be the showiest. So we tuck it to the side. Same thing with a rain garden. If you just, you know, you're not so excited, you just want it there, do your good thing, tuck it in the side. Backyard, I mean, then it can be a focal point in the backyard. It could be tucked away in the backyard. It could be larger. It really depends on what works for you and how you want your rain garden to be. But then the first key is going to be finding, you know, stormwater runoff sources. And that is really most likely going to be the downspout. And it's easy enough to cut off a downspout, add a little piece, move it to different areas. And that's not a scary part at all, really. You know, it's just, or if it goes directly into sort of a drain, you can cut it, you can move it. These are projects that I've done with students on even campus landscapes. So it's just taking what's existing and then modifying it a little bit to bring the water to where you want it to go. So you can see the area in red is the area of the roof that we're capturing, and then the downspout is going to be taking that water in. So other areas could be your driveway, pathways. You know, how do you capture that stormwater? And thinking about that. Then working with existing trees. So you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, large tree. So basically, you know, the drip line, which is the area kind of where the branches come out from the tree, down, straight down, excavation should not be within that drip line of the tree. So you want to set your rain garden somewhere outside of that zone. Let the tree do its thing. It's been there, it's happy. Let's keep it working and doing it. But then setback requirements. So if you've got your sort of typical garden right there, you know, setup of a house with a lawn, this kind of shows. So yeah, so it's about 3 feet from the sidewalk, and then about 5 feet from, it's usually 5 feet from any kind of edge, property edge. And then we want that 10 feet away from the house. So those are going to be the main ones that you want to think about. And then we can get into the fun stuff. Like, what are the shapes that we want to think about, and how can we kind of have fun with this? I kind of like this one where it's, you know, it's this modern, edgy, it's very, you know, it's very modern, it's very linear, but it's kind of like cool shape. You know, so this is kind of a little bit more rectilinear. This is, I think, a really cool one where it's just this tiny little rain garden here. And then he's built in a planter box up against the house, but you've got a bit of a bridge so you can walk up and reach those planters, but then you can see where the downspout is coming down, capturing that stormwater, but also allowing for that multifunctionality where not only is it a rain garden, but it's also an area to grow food and do all of this very cool other stuff. So you can see there's the rain garden. This is like, ooh, we're really going nutso here with our design. We got a little S-shaped thing, craziness, you know, just going a little wild. Pretty simple circle kind of rain garden here, right? In the middle of lawn, easy, but at a low point. And the thing to think about, the kind of like guidelines, is we really want to try and have at least 4% minimum size for your rain garden. And that's 4% of the amount of square footage of stormwater that you're capturing. So that, you know, if you have the 800 square foot, then a minimum of 4% is going to be, you know, whatever that is. I don't have that in my head, but in this case, you've got 150 square feet available, which is actually ends up being 18.75%. And that means you've got more than enough, right? With your 300 square foot, you want to have that minimum of 12 square foot, which is 4%. So in most cases, this isn't even going to be an issue, right? You should have, you know, more than enough space. You know, if you have 12 square feet, then you can capture 300 square feet of water from your roof. So this shouldn't be an issue. This is more of a guideline thinking about, you know, as you're moving forward, what are some of the things that you should think about? And then in terms of programming, you know, it can be as simple as just a single purpose thing where it's just a small low point garden that is capturing stormwater. So very simple single purpose programming. Here's another example, you know, with more of that amoeba shape, but existing lawn on a slope. And then they created this shape of a rain garden to hold and capture excess water so that it doesn't go into the storm drains. But then you can kind of have fun, I think, with the multi-purpose programming. So this is the courtyard at the landscape architecture building. Actually, it's right here behind me, where we designed a rain garden that's also meant for therapeutic value, that also has seating areas, that include shade structures. You know, it becomes a space that people want to be in and actually spend time in. You know, we saw a version of this, we saw a different angle of this garden too, where there's a bench to sit in, there's a moment to pause, there's the combination, the walkway, you can see the water can drain between the two sides because it's, you know, it's permeable in between that. So that allows the whole space is the rain garden, but you're allowed to have a pathway through, a bench for seating. Similarly, this is one where, you know, you've got more of that Japanese garden aesthetic with some walkways, areas of pathways, but also areas for drainage, you know, creating then a sense of an actual garden design, not just, as I was saying, sticking a rain garden because, you know, I have to have a rain garden or I just want to get the rebate. No, the idea is let's actually create a space that people want to be in that does more than just capture water. This is a garden in Davis where I am that I think is really fun, where they've got the rain gardens actually pretty deep here. And then they've done these boards that kind of go across so that you are walking on this bridge and you can kind of lean over and look in, and they're always playing with lots of fun different plants and testing them out. This is in Village Homes, also in Davis, where the entire development, so it's kind of like a housing development done in the 70s, very, you know, sustainable kind of thing. It's like this iconic sustainable development kind of thing that's held up. But essentially all of the stormwater from the entire complex drains into this series of bioswales and rain gardens, and everything from there is kept on site. So there's nothing that goes, they have overflows in case it needs to go to storm drains, but essentially everything from the entire area goes into these storm drains that are, you know, during the summer, they're dry, they're planted along the edges, but in winter, and we saw it this year, it was crazy with all of the amount of rain that we got. You could see these were actually like flowing only with stormwater, but then with fun bridges going across, doing things like that, which is kind of fun. So here you can see again, walking across that area, the edges also become benches for people to sit on, contemplate, meditate, enjoy the beautiful scenery. Again, this is going back to the one that has the multi-purpose of rain garden and growing food. So we've got some urban ag going on. And really, you can incorporate, I think what I'm trying to show is that you can incorporate beautiful elements of design. So here we've got permeable paving, we've got an edge along it that actually has been engraved. And then within that, sorry, my light goes on or goes off automatically if I don't move enough. That's the reason that I do all of this. It's not that I'm just chipper. Anyway, so edging, grasses, you really can see some beautiful detailing on this so that it's not just about digging a hole and putting in some plants. Here again, this is a rain garden here on the Davis campus. This was designed by Kevin Perry and the Student Leadership in Green Infrastructure Club, which is a club that actually goes through around campus and is installing these in areas. They're doing lawn conversion. So they're taking areas that were previous lawns and adding things. So you've got a runnel and we've got plants. And at the same time, what's really fun is we're using these to see how the different plants work, right? So Carex divulsa over here. We've got some different aloes. This is, I think, an elfin aloe, elfin blue, some bulbini, all sorts of fun things to see how are these plants doing in these different conditions. And then being able to play around with the conveyance system, so here you can see your typical stormwater downspout. But then the students in this case have actually created a runnel to move that water that becomes more of a visual that really sort of highlights the fact that the water is moving through. It gets it that 10 feet away. So it's fulfilling that practical purpose, but at the same time, it's doing it so that when it rains, it becomes a spectacle. You get to see it, you get to celebrate it. It becomes something that's beautiful and that's worth watching. So here you can see the runnel, and this is, using wood that isn't going to break down, and using like a marine grade paint on it. Here's one above ground conveyance as well, where the stormwater, the pipe downspout hits a metal runnel and then falls down the side of the wall into an area of the rain garden right there. Another sort of runnel system that you can see. So there's the runnel, but you can also see how it goes underground with a grate over the top of it. So that's kind of fun, walking over it, you can see it. This is actually a student project that I built with students a few years ago I teach a design build studio. And so this one was really fun in that we're capturing water from the roof of this building over on the right. And then we created an above ground runnel that takes all of the water over the pathway. So you can see there's a pathway just underneath that runnel. And then it goes down into this down the rain chain and into, this is a seating element, but also a runnel that moves the water through here. And we had a lot of fun with the spectacle thing. It then fills in another sort of catchment basement before it goes across the path and into the rain garden that is over on the left-hand side. But really saying, like, let's celebrate this water. Let's show it off instead of hiding it in the pipe and sending it off into the bay as quickly as we can. So here's some other examples, just really simple sort of surface conveyance that you can see. A beautiful one here where excess water this is all permeable. And so it can actually go in between the cracks and go into the area before it goes into the rain garden. So really just like nice, simple details. Just again, a concrete runnel that brings it into the grasses and the rain garden over there. This was another student project here in the courtyard that I've been talking about, where the students were able to take water from an a patio that's off over to the right And basically what happened was the patio runoff just was sent directly into a storm drain that was just right below it. And we were able to divert that and create extra piping that we sort of moved, that we tucked along the edge of a building before having it shoot out into this sort of, really beautiful, sort of simple runnel, and then going in and creating its own little rain garden area. Again, with concrete. This is one so that you can see how simple that this is. This is a DIY at home, cutting a pipe in half and just moving the water to exactly where you want to go. So all of these are just like above on surface, using sort of the rock area and moving it through that so that you've got sort of, a dry riverbed is what people call it. That allows the water, in this case, it's moving underneath. You can see the concrete pad, and it's allowed to go underneath that concrete pad. This is the continuation of that overhead project that I was showing you that the students did. So this is the bench on the left-hand side. And so the water goes through here, fills up this drain, and then moves in a pipe across the pathway until it hits this runnel that then sends it into the rain garden. So really just like making it look like something that we're excited about. But then maybe there are cases where you want to hide it. Maybe you don't want that 10 feet from your house to the rain garden to be this moment, to be all about the rain garden. And so you can actually you can dig a pipe below, and you can do it at subsurface. So you can create a pipe that then just pops out, or you can really dig into the ground, put in piping. And then I've actually designed rain gardens before where, what happens is when the stormwater goes in and it goes through that pipe, there's a pop-up sort of in the middle of the rain garden right there. And when there's water pressure, then the water flows underground through the piping, and then the pressure pops the little pop-up and then allows the water to flow into the rain garden. So you can actually tuck away some of that water until it reaches the rain garden. So you can see there it is going underneath. Walkways we already talked about. So really simple kind of wood walkways between, or an easy way to do that, little bridges, lots of different ways to get the water to move. So that's kind of giving an overview of what are the things, what are the considerations. I think in the next section, we're going to do a brief question and answer now. And then in the next section, I will go through some of sort of the planting design and other options of like once we've kind of cited it and know what we want to do. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Paige to direct me with any questions that may have come up.
Thank you, Haven. Such wonderful information we're all learning. And I always tell Haven, I just love her energy. I like smile a lot when she's presenting. So thank you for brightening our morning, Haven. So I sent in a reminder to folks on the chat that we'd love to hear your questions via Q&A. And we actually don't have any so far. So I'm just going to pause for a moment in case any come in. I know there's a lot of information coming at us, and we'd also have a Q&A at the end. So just gonna pause, allow Haven to have a sip of water too.
Thank you.
Of course.
It's amazing. I'm answering all your questions. They come up and then bam, I've given you an answer.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay, we got a question. Someone was mentioning that they live in a townhouse end unit with minimal rear yard that is not covered with concrete, and they're looking for suggestions.
So there is a rear yard that it doesn't have concrete. Is that my understanding?
They have a minimal rear yard that is not covered with concrete.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's the perfect site for a rain garden. So I would say that the next steps are kind of if you can find a low point within the yard, if there's a natural place where that water drains or that you can see where it just dips a little bit, that's probably going to be the ideal spot. And then looking around the townhouse to see where the downspout is and taking that downspout and then figuring out how you can move the downspout into this area where you want to put your rain garden, which can be, as I was saying, it could maybe go underground, it could go above ground, it could be a runnel, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. But then piping that water into the space, starting small, really just starting with a small little area, letting the water get to it, and then you can build on it as you want. You know, maybe create a seating area next to it so that you can enjoy it and watch all of the pollinators and birds as they come.
Thank you, Haven. And I want to acknowledge that because of our note that we needed some more Q&A, we got a bunch flooded in. So we will have 2 more that we answer right now, but the rest we'll answer at the end where we have a longer period because we do have a lot more information to cover. So the next question is, must it be a natural depression or can you dig down for a place that is closer to your downspout?
Yeah. Oh, you can definitely dig down. It's just in terms of, you know, for me, for design, it's easy to like, I like having parameters. And so places to start instead of like blank slate. And so it's easy to say, this makes sense to put a rain garden because it's a natural depression, but you can just dig down. I mean, I would say the guidance is 10 feet from your house. And then if there's a spot right there, dig down. And then you've got a little slope that lets the water come in and that's your rain garden. So no, you don't need to find the actual lowest point.
Thank you, Haven. And speaking of 10 feet away from your house, we had a question that said that their side yards are not 10 feet away from the house. Can they still put a rain garden in there?
Yeah, you know, this is the thing. So 10 feet is guidance. And it's, again, I like having those parameters. It makes things, you know, sort of easier, I think, to figure out. But, you know, I would check with county guidelines, check with city guidelines to make sure that, you know, you can do it up near your fence. But everything I've seen, all of these side yards, you know, I put gardens in right up against the fence with no problem. So I would say, don't think of the 10 feet as guidance. And if it ends up being closer, just be cognizant that it actually is on a downslope, right? That you're not somehow putting it too close to your house so that the water can go back towards your house. You want to make sure that the natural flow is away from your house, and then you're going to be fine.
Thank you, Haven. And a quick question. I know I said 3, but this 4th one is really relevant, and I'd love for folks to get this clarification. Someone was wondering if there are any issues if it is against the house.
Yeah, I mean, so again, it's not ideally, like if you think about it with any kind of garden, ideally you don't have it right up against the house, just because if you're trying to hold on to water, you don't want to store water, right? I mean, the purpose of a rain garden is to take some of that water. You don't want to store that water right up against the house just because of potential flooding issues. However, if you have good drainage, if the drainage is going away from the house, right? If you have some slope away from the house, I'm not that concerned about it. As I said, you know, general guidance, don't put it right up against the house. However, if you can make sure that that water naturally moves away from, sorry, again with the light, moves away from the house, I think you're going to be fine.
Thank you, Haven. We will get back to the educational content, but folks in attendance, please keep sending those questions to the Q&A. We do see that there's some more here in our inbox, but we will get to them at the end, and you'll maybe have more questions as Haven discusses additional related topics. So thank you, Haven.
Okay, cool. Then I will keep going, and we can talk a little bit about planting design, which is my thing. This is the part that I guess I've been excited the whole time, but I'm really going to rev it up now with the planting design, because I think this is something that for us on the West Coast, we don't get to talk about plants and green infrastructure like there's just not enough information and research. Like if you look in Europe, if you look in the East Coast, they've got these amazing bioswales and rain gardens and all of these plants that they're putting in that people have studied. And then you come out to the West Coast and people say, use juncus, which is a nice green sort of, reed that, or I don't know if it's a reed or a set, anyway, juncus, that goes in the bottom because it can take water and it also can take dry conditions. And so you look at our gardens and it's just juncus everywhere. And so I'm really excited. And a lot of my research is focusing on what are some plants that we can use? How can we incorporate all of these? I mean, we're in California and we have the most amazing native plants, beautiful native plants that can be used in gardens. We've got amazing drought tolerant plants. So what are these plants that we can use and that we can integrate to create like stunning rain gardens? So what plants then are appropriate? What are the ones that we should be thinking about just in terms of guidance but as we start planning for our rain gardens? Obviously so much of this is going to be site specific and location specific. I can't tell you, I'm in the Central Valley in Davis, and I am so jealous of all of you in the Bay Area because you can grow anything. And I will go to Annie's Annuals to go buy plants. And I know that all of these wonderful plants that I buy, of the 6 that I buy, 2 might survive my Davis Central Valley climate, but I'm hopeful every time. So be glad that you are where you are. Awesome San Mateo County, great plant selection, great climate for that. But you still have to think about your specific climate, right? And so this is another reason why I can't be like, again, one of the things I always want to do and always want is the list. I want the list. What are the plants that will grow here? Give me the list and then I'll go from there. So gets tricky in this type of thing because it so depends on the different conditions, right? There's never the one list that meets everything. So what you need to do is start thinking about what is the condition of your rain garden? Where is it? So obviously thinking about are you in the sun? If so, if it's full sun, what are some of the plants that you want to think about? And in general, what we're thinking about are plants that are tough, drought tolerant, and can do well with a little bit of inundation. And I think this is where people start freaking out when they think about rain gardens, is that they're really trying to get plants that can just like take it all and like have to be these superheroes, as I mentioned earlier. And the reality is that the majority of the plants in a rain garden are not going to be at the very bottom. The majority of plants are just ones that really are going to be your like drought tolerant superstars that you know already, the ones that you use, the ones that you love. So, salvias and bulbinis and penstemons and all of these like good, really great plants. A lot of California natives that we also know do well in ornamental garden situations. So start with that. Then that's your sunny side, but then you also need to think about, are you in the shade? And we've got, again, some really great plants that do well in shade, and thinking about those plants and what are your go-to for any kind of shade garden, right? So are you using coral bells? Are you using, ferns like we have in this photo? Are there plants that are just your go-to? Because those are going to be the ones that are going to form the backbone of your rain garden. And then when you think about the ones at the bottom, that's where I'm doing research and testing stuff, but also you shouldn't be afraid to experiment and to test different things, because the reality is that, yes, we had a crazy wet year, but most years we don't have that much water, and and the inundation isn't that long. And so, we talk about these plants that have to be able to withstand inundation for days on end. And the reality is that, most of the time that's not going to be the case. So really just testing plants and saying, I know this does well in most cases, that's probably going to be a go-to. And also using smaller plants, trying seeds, so that you don't feel like you've spent all of this money putting a plant at the bottom of your rain garden, some 15-gallon, 5-gallon specimen. No, the bottom of your rain garden is where you want to start thinking about, trying some seed mixes, trying like plugs, 4-inch plants, the plants that you can really like play around with. And if you lose, like when I go to Annie's, right? And I know that I'm buying these plants that I'm testing. If I get that winner, then I'm going to be so happy. But I also know that maybe it's not always going to work. So thinking about those for the bottom. Designing for low maintenance. This one I think is really, really tricky because I have a hard time. It's all about low maintenance, and everyone wants low maintenance, no maintenance. But again, we're talking about a garden, and a garden is a living thing that will only get better and better over time. It's not like a piece of architecture where its best moment is the moment that it opens to the public, or, you know, that you move in. And then it just starts to fall apart. Whereas gardens keep going and keep getting better. And as a result, they're going to require some maintenance, and always will. That said, we can choose plants that we know are good performers, that do well, and that don't require a ton of cutting back and trimming and that sort of thing. So this is a garden at UC Davis, all locally native. So these are all plants. These are all local ecotypes from our watershed, and just very simple, huge swaths of grass, but with different colors to create sort of that sense of movement and to create, you know, it really feels natural, but it also is clearly designed, and you've got sort of that color spectrum. And a key part of that is designing for good plant density and thinking about, you know, how do you space, how do you get things packed in so that it looks full, so it doesn't look, what really makes me sad are these rain gardens that are all rocks with 3 plants in them, you know, and it's just like the 3 plants that stick up in the midst of like all sorts of like river rock or gravel or that sort of thing. The plants are doing such amazing things, and they're cleaning the water, and they should be the focus, not just rocks. So one of the things that I do, you can see these poppies. I really love using California native wildflowers, especially as a garden is filling in. And so using those, because they're annuals, you get that color the first year and you get that density. And then as your other plants, your perennials start to fill in, then the annuals will die back. They won't reseed as well because they'll be outcompeted by the perennials. But when you have that first year where it's just like your tiny little 4-inch plants, this is a really good time to add some of these California native wildflowers, and they're fabulous for the pollinators and the insects. And so it's like a win-win, and it's inexpensive. You get color, you get density. So I'm a huge fan right now, all about the wildflower seeds. And then, you know, the goal is really using native and adaptable ornamental plants. And I definitely, you know, I kind of preferentially go for California native plants because of the fact that, you know, these plants and insects have co-evolved for so long, and we want the caterpillars and we want the butterflies that have co-evolved with these plants. And so we want to, you know, really support them. But I'm also not so stringent that I'm like, oh my God, it has to be only native. That's it, nothing else. Because we have some amazing ornamentals that are drought tolerant, that are from Australia, that are from the Mediterranean, that we love, that still attract pollinators and still do good things. So I'm all for creating that mix of different flowering plants. So, you know, this is an example. This is a rain garden at UC Davis with a mix of, so we've got some buckwheat and we've got deer grass and penstemon, but also hesperaloe, which is not native. The poppies are native. You know, so a mix of the two, some salvia in the background. This is a residential rain garden that I designed. This is one where it actually does have a pop-up where the water is taken from the roof, piped underground, and then it pops up in the center of the rain garden. But a mix, you know, in this case, the client really wanted sort of more ornamental plants near the front, like at the house area, and then native plants along the back in a more naturalistic sort of thing. I keep mentioning that we've been testing sort of native plants and ornamental plants. This is here at Davis. This is the Western Center for Agricultural Equipment. And this is a sort of research area. We have an internship going where we're actually testing different plants in rain garden situations. So you can see we've got different, this is again the Hesperaloe. We're testing different agaves, BAWSCA. And what we're doing is we've got sort of the rain garden that goes from the top to a low point and then back up again. And we're planting in bands, again, from the top down to the bottom and then up, so that we can see kind of how far down the plants can survive and do well. And, which, if any of them, can survive sort of that bottom inundation zone. And so this has been really fun just to see, like, what are the plants that are doing well. We've got 3 areas. This is called Smartscape 1, and this is a combination of ornamental and native, mostly ornamental plants. And then in Smartscape 2, we are testing, they're all California natives, but these are natives that are really available easily at most garden places, so some of them you can find, a Salvia Winifred Gilman, Penstemon Margarita Bop, you can find at most nurseries, at a lot of California nurseries. These are the sort of the natives that are easy to get. And then we have a third area, where I didn't have a photo of that, but there in the third one, which is our Smartscape 3, we're actually testing native plants, local ecotypes. So ones from our watershed, and seeing how well those do. So those are really going to be more specific, more planted as seeds and as plugs. And so we're looking and we're trying to compare, and we're trying to see what does well and to come up with those lists, so that we can say, hey, you're thinking about a rain garden, here are some plants to consider. Here are the ones that do well on the edges, but most importantly, because pretty much anything does well on an edge, here are the ones that can survive that inundation and go in the bottom. And so this is another view. You can see the cars in the background. All of the parking lot drains down into this rain garden, which is, again, a mixture of, this is lavender on the left with yarrow and deer grass, California fuchsia, so a mixture of ornamental and native plants. In terms of designing for biodiversity, so let's really think about how can we, again, get this beautiful garden, but also plan for biodiversity, bring in the birds and the insects and the hummingbirds and butterflies and all of that. So the key things to think about, and these are principles taken from ecology. Create niches, right? So design in layers. So think about sort of a lower area, medium area, and a higher area, because that creates all of these different perches, places for habitat. One flat layer isn't really going to create habitat. Having multiple areas and hiding places, that's where you're going to get it. So think about, the vertical layers, different heights of plants. Think about places for insects and birds to perch on. It's really like lots of that where it happens. And then thinking about edges. So if you study ecology, there's the whole thing about the edges, and that's where biodiversity happens. It's like between a meadow and a forest, or a wetland and a meadow. Like that's where the different types of vegetation, wet edges, dry, where they meet, that's where biodiversity happens. And so if you can create that, that's going to be this area where you've got a lot more biodiversity. So, thinking about plants where it is this combination of different layers, things that pop up, thinking about like planting in large swaths of the same plant. Like, let's say you're trying to design for bees. Bees like an area of it, like 6 feet of the same, a 6 foot sort of patch of the same type of flowers. So having like a patch of, in this case, you can see the lavender, another patch of fuchsia that is big enough to really attract those bees to bring them in. And so thinking about that and thinking about then doing that also helps aesthetically, right? What we don't want to do is plant one of everything because it's biodiverse. That isn't good for the bees and isn't good for these beneficial insects that want the patches because they can be more efficient when there's a patch. And it's not even good for us because our eyes, if we've got too much going on, like it's not restful for our eyes. We want our eyes to sweep sort of through the landscape, not just like jump and bounce around from all the different places. So again, that multifunctional design works across. So other things to think about, plants that will bloom at various times of the year. You really want to think about that. for the bees, especially any of the pollinators, right? Not just have like this one big like spring fling and then nothing for the rest of the year, right? You want to provide food throughout the year. Mixture of California native, compatible non-native, don't use invasive plants, experiment with plants that are native to your specific location. And then, thinking about resiliency and thinking about climate change and testing some of these plants, really thinking about, yes, again, we want to use our California natives, but we also want to think about, well, as temperatures warm, Davis in 20 years is supposed to be like Barstow, California, so, I guess I need to start thinking about what's in Barstow and what I want to look at and find. So, really starting to think about that and testing some of plants. Like that's definitely, if there's something that you take away from this, it's don't be afraid to experiment and test and try things, especially if they're like 4-inch plugs, because you're not losing anything if it doesn't work. It's not, don't fill your whole garden, go with the majority backbone, tried and true, but then have little patches where you're testing things, because who knows, you may find like the perfect plant that is just like amazing for you. So in terms of thinking about designing for biodiversity with birds, you really want to have like that sun-beaten log or a place to perch. Places like the log is really good because it's a great place. It's biodegrading, like insects hide underneath it, birds can perch on top of it. It's always an issue of like, how do you find the log that looks right, that's pretty and not just like, so like, what's that? So thinking about larger stones and logs, as I said, perches, food all over. Local soil is really key, so that you've got healthy invertebrates. Thinking about like all of the mycorrhizal, like microbial stuff going on in the soil is really good. I mentioned same species clumps. A little bit of leaf litter is okay and encouraged, because that's really good for the birds. Here's like that perfect bee patch, right? And really zoning in and like, yes, that is like this sort of mecca. The bees are going to see that and be like, woohoo, this is amazing. And again, these are gold fields. So this is something that is a California native annual, wildflower, wonderful patches with Phacelia behind and some poppies, lots of annuals within a meadow, creating spectacular color that's going to make, I know it makes me happy when I see it, but also is going to be great for the bees. So thinking about for bees specifically, like small mounds of coarse sand, like a lot of bees, we have so many California native bees, right? We've got our European honeybees and they're great and we're losing them, but we also have these amazing native bees, and a lot of them are ground nesting bees. And when you can find a ground nesting bee, it's like the coolest thing ever, because you see their little holes. And so coarse sand is really good for these mining and solitary bees that are ground nesting. And again, like just fun for education and cool and seeing that sort of stuff. Mix of wildflowers for continuous bloom, perennial and annual seeds that I think, I've been saying enough, mostly native plants. And then for bees, the colors that they really like, blue, purple, violet, white, and yellow. And then the clumps, clumps, swaths, patches, all of those like 4 to 6 feet wide is ideal. And then we got our sexy butterflies. And what are some of the things we want to think about with the butterflies? You can think about rain gardens that are designed with those important food sources for the caterpillars, for the butterflies to lay their eggs, right? So pipevine swallowtail, the bay checker spot. These are ones that, if you plant your pipevine, that's going to be really important. If you're planting milkweed, you can help with the monarchs, so the primary food plants of the butterfly caterpillars. We talk a lot about the butterflies and how cool they are, but then we don't really talk enough about those caterpillars that turn into the butterfly. So making sure that the caterpillars have the food that they need, right? So the milkweed is absolutely essential for a monarch butterfly caterpillar. And so placing that in your rain garden, it's a great way to bring those butterflies that you want to see, and do it in, I think that this is Asclepias speciosa. So this is showy milkweed, can be absolutely stunning and so fun in the spring when they start to pop up because they're deciduous. And so like mine are just starting to come out and it's so much fun. I'm having people like send me photos because they're so excited about theirs. So Beneficial insects, really, again, it's those rotting logs, boulders, bare soil. Sticky plants are really fun, like using some of these like monkey flowers, columbine, have this cool stickiness to them that attract, that insects get stuck in, and then the predatory insects come and eat those, and that's protecting the plant. Like cool stories about how these things have co-evolved and really fun to see. Like if you have monkey flower, if you have columbine, looking at it and seeing all of the little insects that are stuck in there, it's just like, it's gross, but it's really fun to watch. And so then thinking about kind of some of the mulch that you want to add, right? And, you know, I am not a huge fan of the ones on the bottom. I think that at the very bottom of a swale sort of rain garden, it makes sense to add a little bit, but even then you don't need to. I do not want you coming out of here thinking, oh my God, I'm doing a rain garden. It's just going to be a lot of rocks, and it's rocks and gravel and river rocks and 5 plants. No, I think you should focus mostly on the plants, mostly on healthy soil. You know, mulch is really good, especially along the edges. Heavier mulch won't float as much. You know, I love mini bark, but it does at the bottom of a rain garden. If there's water, it will float up to the top a little bit. So I think it's important that we use other materials as well. You know, some of the heavier stuff, or maybe rocks at the bottom do make some sense. So you can see, you know, organic mulch, pea gravel, the river rock, those are all different things that you can use. And then I just want to close quickly by talking a little bit about maintenance and how important it is. Because all of this, any garden, any rain garden, any green infrastructure, anything you do, you know, it's not, we talk about like extending the indoors, outdoors, and, you know, creating these outdoor rooms. The reality is that there is always going to be maintenance involved, and there's a lot that can be done to reduce that maintenance, but it's still part of it. And so I like to think of it like when I teach classes, all of my classes have a component where it's talking about designing for maintenance. It's talking about, you know, so thinking about not like creating something that is going to be hard to maintain. So thinking about things, you know, knowing what that maintenance is going to be ahead of time, understanding how frequently you need to cut back a grass or weed, and making sure that people understand that that first year or two during establishment, that's the tricky part. And if you can get your garden through that, then it becomes so much easier afterwards, that then it really does become this maybe once or twice a year, kind of some spot weeding. Really important to note that weeding is your friend. This is like in the time we learned this during COVID, like how many people went out to their gardens during COVID because it was the time to be outside, and it's the healing power of nature. I lead anytime I have office hours, they're outdoors weeding. You know, I'm like, if you want to come talk to me, that's great, but we're going to do some weeding. And I'm actually sitting here right now in sweatpants because I was out weeding and I'm soaking wet because I was out weeding because I had, this is crazy. I had a former student who graduated 3 years ago email me and say, hey, can I come weed in the courtyard today? And it was raining and he still wanted to do it. And we just sat out there and we talked and we drank coffee and we were weeding, and it was meditative, and it like got me all zen and ready to give this presentation. You know, that's the kind of thing, that's how I want you to think about weeding. Not as this like, oh, hassle, awful thing, but thinking about, you know, who's doing the maintenance work. If you have someone doing the maintenance work, it's really important to make sure that they understand what is involved. You know, if you're doing it yourself, you know, it's not, all of it is manageable. All of it can be done. It's not scary. It's not time consuming, and it's not a horrible thing. It's just, it can be sort of worked into your regular routine, or taught, like explained from the beginning. If you've got someone doing it, this is how it's going to be, working with them, even like during the design, to talk about how it's going to go on. You know, so thinking about what happens, like this was the rain garden that was just installed, and, you know, being there when that mulch was floating, and cleaning it up and fixing it and testing the plants that, you know, taking out the plants that didn't take that inundation. But so thinking about, so here you can see this was that runnel that I was telling you about that the students did, but part of every class that I teach, you know, I teach like a design build studio, and part of it is not only just going in and doing the maintenance and doing the installation, which is the fun part, but also doing the maintenance on the previous year's work and teaching students how, how to cut grasses back, value of weeding, when things go in, when things get pulled, so that it's not something when they're creating designs, when we're creating designs, it's not something that takes up too much time. It's just understood. It's built into that. So, here are some of the things: hand weeding, mulching, plant trimming. All of these are things that just make sense as you go through within your weeding. Or within your maintenance. I love this picture because the students are paying such close attention to the weeding aspect there. And no, you're not going to have people doing that yourself. You probably won't get that detailed, but maybe it becomes this Zen moment. I swear I get my best thinking done when I'm just like sitting outside drinking coffee and weeding. And weeding in gravel is the most fun thing because it's most satisfying, like to have it like look horrible and then you take out the weeds and it's like perfect and pristine. More examples of hand weeding, replacing mulch every few years or putting it in after the project, cutting back plants, more cutting back, in the fall, like definitely planning for a big sort of fall, winter cutback of grasses, of plants that die back. You can see deadheading, removing some leaves. In this case, yes, it's leaving some leaves for the plants, but also going into others, removing some others so you're not clogging areas. And then this is something that I definitely recommend is just take photos. Take a lot of photos. You'll look back and be like, oh my God, this is amazing. So like, look at, this is a garden. This is the garden that's behind me at the Hunt Hall Courtyard. The final slide that I have shows what it looks like now. And so it's just amazing to be able to see how it's changed. This used to be lawn and the students pulled out all of it and planted it. Having that maintenance schedule then is going to be really important. How often do you do it? Having that ahead of time and knowing is going to make all the difference in the world. And I hate ending on the like maintenance note, but I think we have to like reframe what maintenance is. And, maybe we call it stewardship, but this is the fun part. It's not something that you should be upset about or worried about, or, I don't want to do any of it. This is what makes your garden like spectacular and wonderful. So just planning ahead for it, working on it and enjoying it, that will get you to this, which is that same garden that was just in the photo. So that is it for me. I talked a little more than I wanted to, but I just want to say thank you. This is my contact information. I also, as a little plug, I put up my website, which has information on the classes I teach, but it also includes the sheep mowers program that I run here on the university campus, where we're using campus sheep to mow our own lawns. And we're on Instagram, and it's really fun to check out because we bring in like 25 sheep onto like the main campus lawns, and then we have crafting events, and we've published research to show, again, I'm all about the mental health benefits of nature. And so we've shown that students are actually a lot happier when they watch the sheep graze. And so it helps reduce stress and do things like that.
BAWSCA, and it is a really great local agency that is really here to help you save money. And there's rebates that are relevant to the topic we discussed today, and other really exciting rebates. So we all want to do these great stylish improvements that at the same time can be helping our local waterways and preventing runoff. So we're really excited to share this information on their behalf. Unfortunately, the wonderful Kyle couldn't be here today, but we definitely wanted to still deliver this awesome content to you all. Next slide, Haven. So BAWSCA is made up of 26 agencies in Alameda, Santa Clara, and right here in San Mateo County. It serves 1.8 million people and 40,000 businesses and community organizations. So regarding what are these agencies? So it could be a city, like a city you live in, a certain water district that you're part of, a certain water company that you're part of, and a university, and they actually purchase water wholesale from the San Francisco regional water system. So then it gets it to you. And they really want to make sure that they emphasize their goal of providing high quality supply of water at a fair price. So the program objectives, they wanted to emphasize that, you know, we can do a lot here with our outdoor water use. It really can be such a great opportunity for water conservation in the BAWSCA service area. So they really want to emphasize what we can do here, and the rebates I'll discusses that outdoor water use. And it can also be used of like water efficient plants and innovative techniques to help conserve that water and ensure that the future water supply is in good shape, because we're in California. I know, as Haven mentioned, we have a really rainy season that we had. We have a changing climate, so who knows what next year will bring, who knows how dry this summer will be. So we just really want to know and be ready for what we can do to have just great techniques for our changing climates. Next slide, Haven. So speaking of the wonderful rebates, so this is part of them, and there's another slide after this I'll talk about with additional ones. So there's a lot that we can work with here. And if you're familiar with Close the Bay and the webinars we've had, or you follow us on social media, you know we've mentioned that rain barrel rebate. So there is one through BAWSCA, but there's also a second one that anyone in San Mateo County can apply to. So even if you're not in the BAWSCA agency area, we just wanted to emphasize that there is a rebate available for you. But look at that price saver, up to $200. So we definitely want to emphasize that rebate. A second one that is very in line with what we talked about a lot today is that lawn conversion. So they have a rebate called Lawn Be Gone, and it can be coupled with an additional rain garden rebate addition. And so that's actually $300 for that, in addition to the $1 to $4 per square foot that you would get for that lawn conversion. So it's a great complement of the two. And it's actually one of BAWSCA's most popular programs. And so it's about taking out your inefficient lawn and putting in a low water using landscape. And so that range of 1 to 4 just depends on what specific member agency that you live in. And so they have information on their website that you could find out that exact information, but we wanted to give that range. And just emphasizing what Haven talked about a lot was those California native landscapes. So just so you know, they need 1 to 3 years of water to establish, and then they may not need any water except during the hottest summers or driest winters. So it's really helping you build that resilient landscape that could be really adaptable to our climate. And again, this is a good project to start now and all the time. So please look into that Lawn Be Gone rebate. And also in the same application, so saving you time, you can apply for an efficient irrigation equipment, including inline drip irrigation, smart irrigation controllers, and rain sensors. So your system only turns on when your plants need it. And that rebate reduces the cost to the customer, you, by $75 after paying $100 for it. So really emphasizing these wonderful price savers here, because they want to do and we want to do what we can that we could do these great actions for our yards. So the next rebates discussed real quick are the irrigation hardware rebates. You can see the 3 on the screen there. It was new programs that were launched about 2 years ago. And so there's these 3 different pieces that you can have rebates for. And they haven't been the most popular, but they have also seen the most increase, because we really need to have those out there, and we want to get the word out on behalf of BAWSCA about that. So that's a high efficiency sprinkler nozzles, high efficiency spray bodies, and high efficiency large rotors. So great money savers there. And the other rebate to cover is the residential self-audit tool. So you choose to order a conservation kit or follow online instructions to complete a home water audit. And it gives feedback on how to fix specific issues or whether those programs can be available to help replace the device. So this is a great kit that you can receive, and or you can use that online tool to take a scope of your residential area, I mean, your home, and conduct that audit. Next slide, Haven. And speaking of more information from BAWSCA here, for many years, they've offered free landscape classes from local professionals, and they could be a range of topics. They could be about drought-tolerant gardening, or another exciting topic, integrated pest management. And since the pandemic, they have done a hybrid model, in person or virtual, but they have seen that most people attend virtually, so they want to make sure that's available to you. And they also host garden tours, which showcase yards in the Bay Area that replace their lawn with a drought-tolerant yard and feature California native plants. So you saw the great inspiration from Haven, and you could also get some additional inspiration for your yard from that resource from BAWSCA. Next slide, Haven. So speaking of educational opportunities and classes, so here's a list of the next upcoming lineup of webinars from BAWSCA. And if you want to see those online, there is a website where you could see that whole lineup and any other additional ones that they have planned. We'll be including it in our resources email, but I'll just verbally say bawsca.org/conserve/program/events. But again, this URL, along with the other resources we talked about today, will be sent via email. So you can just do a nice little click on that. But as you can see, some great topics to further your education. Next slide, Haven. And because I am not the expert here with BAWSCA, we have wonderful representatives there to answer your questions, such as Kyle. And I've been CC'd in a lot of those emails. They're really great at attending to residential inquiries because they know that, the rebate process can be a little bit, it could feel daunting or confusing, and they have folks there to really help hold your hand through the process so that we all mutually want you to do those great actions for your yard. So I definitely want to plug our local representative, Kyle, to assist you in your needs with the rebate questions. And next slide, which is the last slide. So I just wanted to really thank you all for your time today and taking the steps and wanting to learn how you can create a stylish and drought-tolerant garden with native plants that help protect our precious waterways from harmful runoff. And again, stylish, as you saw from Haven's wonderful imagery. Special thank you again to our expert instructor, Haven. We really appreciated Reed being here, senior program specialist, and our webinar collaborator, BAWSCA. The relevant contact information is on the screen. I will also be emailing that to you. So again, you can just do that copy and paste and get connected with these lovely folks